stop. If you are a buyer and you're contemplating going directly to the listing agent to have them write up their offer for you so that they represent both sides of the transaction, so they're motivated to take your deal over the other offers because they're making more money. Beware, there are some serious pros and cons of doing this. I'm not saying don't do it. I don't love dual agency. That's what it's called when the listing agent represents the buyer and the seller simultaneously. There are some pitfalls to doing that. Just know what you're getting yourself into. I'll kind of share with you what I do on my team when a dual agency opportunity comes up, but both seller and the buyer have risk when they're doing this. So let's get into it. So for those of you who live in Wyoming, Alaska, Vermont, Colorado, Florida, Texas, Kansas, and Maryland, it is outlawed to do any type of dual agency in your state. So this video doesn't even apply to you, but if you are looking to move out of state, you might want to listen to this video. But if you live in those states, this video doesn't apply. But let's think about that for a while. Why would some states outlaw dual agency? And the reason why these states that I just mentioned who are saying, nope, it's against the law if you do dual agency in our state is because they feel the consumer's not being properly represented. And in some cases, that is true. In the last 3 years, we've had a really hot housing market. Most of the homes that went on the market had multiple offers. And I can't tell you how many people's lives that I have ruined because they didn't get their offer accepted. I'm primarily a listing agent here in Orange County, California. I am one of the top producers out here. And I've seen a lot of contracts come across my desk. And during that really hot market, we saw a lot more dual agency, meaning that the buyers would say, hey, Audra, we want this house so much, please, we'll let you represent us. We'll give you our firstborn or whatever it is. Just accept our offer. We'll pay you whatever you want, right? People were very desperate to get their offer accepted. So as a listing agent during that time, I will tell you that I have seen a heightened increase in dual agency. And that dual agency, once again, means that the buyer will go directly to the listing agent and ask to be represented by them as well. Another reason why we've seen a heightened increase in dual agency is because buyers out there are so educated. I mean, seriously, most buyers out there think they're smarter than their buyer's agent and they know more about the house and the area. And they're probably right because that's all they're looking at is one area, one house, one development. So why do they even need a buyer's agent? I mean, they're kind of looking at their houses and finding them online and going to their own open houses, and their agent's never available because, they're doing all their other things they're doing, going to soccer matches and doing yoga. I'm joking. Okay. Making fun of my realtors out there. I don't mean to. I'm sorry. Okay. Should take that out of the video. But anyway, my point is that's how buyers perceive their buyer's agent. They don't really see that they're adding much benefit because most of the buyers, even the buyers that I'm working with, they just kind of call me up and say, hey, we want to see this house. Can you get us in there? Because the power is in the buyer's hands. They want to take the experience into their own hands. They don't want to be messing with some agent and their schedule and their time limits and, they got this showing to do and blah, blah, blah. They just want to go see the house. And one of the ways in which they do that is either come to an open house or make an appointment with the listing agent to see the property directly. All right, buyers, I know you're smart, but you got to watch out for this, okay? If you are planning to contact the listing agent directly, when you're on these internet websites like Trulia, Zillow, Redfin, there's a button that usually says, hey, push this button and schedule an appointment. Now, do realize when you hit that little button and you fill out all your information, you're not contacting the listing agent. You're contacting somebody on their team who's going to meet you out at the property, who's going to schedule the appointment, but they're not the listing agent. So don't fall prey to this. And I don't think that's right. I mean, shouldn't legally Zillow, Trulia, Redfin disclose the fact that they're not the listing agent? Right? It doesn't feel good to me. And I'll tell you, as a listing agent, when I get a call from Zillow or Redfin or Trulia, those companies will just say in general, I always screen any buyer and buyer's agent who's coming into the property. So I'll ask the question, oh, okay, we want to make an appointment at 123 Banana Street at 1 p.m. Yes, okay. Does that work? And I'll say, well, it works, but you need to tell me about your buyer. Oh, I don't know anything about my buyer. I work for, Zillow. Yeah, they just want to go see the property, so I want to show it to them. I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not exposing my seller's property to someone that knows nothing about the buyer. Are they pre-qualified? What are they looking for? Are they motivated? Are they not motivated? Are they just kind of shopping? And they go, well, I don't know. This is the first time I'm meeting them is at your house. I'm like, oh, no. Not showing your house until you find out a little bit more information. That's not really good to have the agent that you don't know meet you at a property, kind of pull the wool over your eyes if you're a buyer, and you walk into this property, you love it, and now you're stuck with an agent that you don't even know is good or not. They might be, but how do you know? You don't. Just be careful about that, okay? Just trying to protect you. Not going to waste your time. You know what to do. So what's the pro or the positive to dual agency? And the first thing that comes to mind for me is that it's streamless communication. I'm dealing directly with the buyer and directly with the seller. There's no buyer's agent that I have to deal with and negotiate with. There's transparency from both sides. Once you get a buyer's agent in there, they can be lying to me and tell me, oh, my buyers, they're backing out. They're not happy with it, blah, blah, blah. And when they're like, no, we're fine. I don't know what they're talking about. But some of these buyer's agents have tactic to negotiate and create drama in a transaction if they're involved. So the beauty of it, if you don't have that, you kind of get a flavor for what the buyer and the seller are doing. So if there are some financial hiccups, with the lender, I'm able to communicate that directly to the seller. Oftentimes it becomes a really good team because we don't have another knucklehead involved. Probably shouldn't say that, but we all know what I'm talking about. So there are some benefits to it for sure. One of the things I love about dual agencies is that my team's in charge. So we're super efficient, we're professional, we get all the documents done on time, we have our contingencies on time, like there's no one to blame, no one's dragging the feet, right? Paperwork and negotiations and timelines are usually, at least in my experience, much more efficient and we'll say respectful of the process because only one agent's in charge. And that is a benefit for both parties involved. There is a new change that has occurred in our industry very recently, as early as January 1st, 2024 in most of the states. And that is that the buyers have to designate who their representation is. It's called a buyer-broker agreement. And even if you go directly to the listing agent, they have to have you sign a buyer-broker's agreement. And in that agreement, this is super important. Please pay attention. I know your eyes are fogging over right now. It's a lot of information. But in that agreement, it's pretty much states that the buyer is going to pay the buyer's agent a certain commission percentage of the sales price or a flat fee. But you, as the buyer, are responsible for paying the buyer's agent. Did you guys hear that? It's no longer the seller's responsibility to pay your buyer's representation.
Whoa, Audra, are you serious? Are you sure that's right?
I'm 100% sure. Now, the seller, so far, in my experience, does cooperate. So they will put on MLS that they're willing to pay the buyer's agent, let's say, we'll just throw this number out, 2.5%. Now, do realize all commissions are negotiable. They're not set, okay? We don't head set pricing and fixed pricing. We don't do that. And if any agent's telling you that, they're lying, okay? Or they just don't know, but no, we don't price fix. So let's say you signed a buyer-broker agreement with your buyer's agent at 2%. You're saying, hey, I'll pay you 2%, and you go find a house you really like, and they have a 1% commission for the buyer's agent. Realize that you as the buyer need to pay that extra percent to the buyer's agent through escrow, or every state's different. Some of you guys don't use escrows, but it is this new requirement that every buyer has to sign a buyer-broker agreement. It's like a listing contract in that way. Like we can't go list a house for sale unless we have an agreement. This is the same that's true for all buyer's agents as well as of today in just about every state and city. Now, a lot of you buyers are out there like, oh, phooey on that. There's no way I'm going to sign a buyer-broker agreement guaranteeing that I have to pay this buyer a certain amount of money or a percentage of the sales price, because what happens if the seller isn't offering that? That's right. You're going to be the one responsible for coming up with the commission. So a lot of these buyers are like, phooey, no way. I'm just going to go directly to the listing agent. Well, even if you go to the listing agent and you want them to write a deal for you, they still are going to make you sign this buyer-broker agreement. And it is important because when you sign that buyer-broker agreement, there are fiduciary responsibilities that they have to extend to you, okay? So it's really important for you to know what you're signing when you're signing that buyer-broker agreement. I would say minimize the term of the agreement. Make sure you're not marking the exclusive box. Like, make sure it's only for a specific transaction. Do not get yourself locked into this, okay? Because what could happen is if you are a buyer, you go directly to the listing agent, they make you sign this buyer-broker agreement, and you mark this is an exclusive agreement with this agent only. You back out of the deal, and now you're tied to that listing agent. Be careful what you're signing. That's the moral of the story. I know that was overkill, but I'm really trying to protect everybody out there. A lot of people don't know this right now. I don't want to scare you about the buyer-broker agreement. There are some really good things about it as well. Back in the day, if we didn't have you sign a buyer-broker agreement in a dual agency situation, as a listing agent, I didn't need to extend any fiduciary responsibilities to the buyer side. But once you sign this agreement with me saying, hey, I want you to represent me, then I have to extend fiduciary responsibilities to both the seller and the buyer. So that's a big change. It should have always been that way if you ask me. The commission structure, we're still working out how that works on this buyer-broker agreement, but do one case at a time. Just make sure you know what you're signing when you're signing this buyer-broker agreement. It's really important. In my opinion, the biggest downside to dual agency is this thing called conflict of interest, meaning that I'm supposed to extend both fiduciary responsibilities to the seller and the buyer. And folks, how in the world do you do that? It's super hard. Like, I am a professional, I'm a pro, right? I'm a great negotiator, and I'm hard. I'm really hard, and I'll ask until I get a firm no. Like, that's what I do for a living. How in the world am I going to do that successfully without angering both sides of the transaction? So if I'm representing the seller and I'm negotiating hard for the buyer is going to be like, hey, are you representing me or are you representing the seller? And then, I lob one back to the seller. I'm like, hey, the buyer wants all these things. This is what their perspective is. And they're going to look at me and say, hey, lady, I hired you to represent me. In fact, I'm paying you. Why is this so hard? Well, it's because I'm a good negotiator and I have to extend fiduciary responsibilities to both sides of the transaction. So as a listing agent, it's very hard to walk the line. Been in that situation. I'm not in love with it as a listing agent. It puts me in a really difficult place. And there is a reason why in several states this is outlawed, and this is the reason for it, okay? It's just very hard to stay neutral in this transaction. I'll give you an example where it becomes tricky for the listing agent, okay? So in fact, this just happened in one of my negotiations here recently, and that was the buyer made an offer saying, hey, Audra, I don't want to mess with termites, like just take it out of the contract. We have people that can do that. So don't write that in the offer. We really want to get the deal. It's a multiple counter situation, like just take it out of the contract. I'm like, okay, fine. And then as we're going through the home inspection, all these other things came up, which by the way, don't worry, it happens all the time, okay? But now my seller is getting nervous and he's like, oh, I don't know. I don't want them to back out. Audra, I'm willing to give them $5,000 to cover, the termite or whatever they want. Like, I just want to get this deal done. Now, they just told me, meaning the sellers just told me that they're willing to give the buyer $5,000. And I know, talking to the buyers, that they're perfectly fine with the way things are. They're not going to ask for $5,000. But should I tell the buyers, like, hey, there's a little extra that you can get from the seller because I just had a conversation? It's not good to be in this situation. So as a listing agent, I'm just going to tell you how I deal with it. And I just look at the terms of the contract and I just abide by the terms of the contract. If the buyer doesn't want $5,000 or termite clearance, they've already agreed to it, then I'm going to keep that private. But my point though is it puts us in a very difficult position. And once again, there's a lot of states this is illegal for the reasons I just pretty much told you in the video. I used to work in corporate America, a company called Ingram Micro. Believe it or not, I was a sales director and a computer nerd before I got into real estate. But I learned a lot from that company. One of the things we were tasked to do, the directors in the company, is we would come up with employee compensation plans. We were always told that we want to compensate our employees for the behavior that we want them to provide. So if we want them to bring in more sales, then we're going to compensate and have a plan where they make more money if they bring in more sales, or if we want them to bring in more clients, more growth, then we would say, hey, you're going to make more money if you bring in X amount of new clients. So we would compensate them on the behavior that we wanted them to really focus on. So the problem that I have with dual agency is that the listing agents are really encouraged to reach out to buyers and have them go direct because we're getting paid more, right? So we are incentivized to really focus on a buyer that doesn't have representation because we make more money, which I'm not a big fan of. Like, I think that's kind of a disservice to buyers. I think they should have fair representation. Now, I'm not saying that that can't happen if you go directly to the listing agent, but understand if you are a buyer and you're in a multiple counter situation and the agent's going to make more money if they go with you, I think you have an unfair advantage, right? If you go that direction. Not always. Not a big fan of this, by the way. So I'm going to tell you what happens when a buyer comes to me directly and how I work this out with the seller up front. So when I first sign a listing agreement, we come up with a commission structure. Like I said, commissions are not set, but let's just use the number of 5%. So I'll say, hey, I'll list your house for 2.5% because I'm offering all these type of services, 2.5 on the buyer side for all these, reasons, okay? And he agrees. So the total commission's 5%. So in my listing agreement, I will actually write in the listing agreement, so we don't have to negotiate, that, hey, the listing fee is 5%. If I represent both the buyer and the seller, I will reduce my commission down to 4%. So I write that in the contract. And the reason why I even decrease my commission is, first of all, I haven't been working with this other buyer for a long time. Only reason why I would be working with them is because they happen upon my open house or contact me online, but it's not somebody I'm working with. And I don't feel right gouging my seller out commission-wise when we all know like that didn't really work that hard, trying to get that buyer in the door. That's just me. Other agents may or may not do this. I don't know. But when a buyer comes to me and says, hey, Audra, will you represent me? Will you cut the seller a good deal? I'm like, well, full disclosure, this is what I'm providing to the seller if you go direct to me, because it's already written. I have to disclose that. It's very transparent, but not all listing agents do offer a discount. So sometimes if you're a buyer and you're going directly to the listing agent, sometimes those agents don't even offer a reduced commission. So just make sure you're working with someone you trust if you're a buyer. Now, if you're a seller, just beware. Like if you're going to accept a dual agency situation, that agent that you hired who's supposed to be your negotiator that's in your court, now they got to be in the buyer's court too. And that may not feel good. What are you going to do? I don't know. You got to have a comfort level with it. These things can turn out extremely well, or they could go completely the wrong direction. Just know kind of the flavor of your agent. Make sure they have experience in this area. I am very upfront with my sellers on how I handle dual agency if it were to arise. I hate it. Like, I don't like being in this situation. I don't like it. So I'll let them know, like, hey, I'll reduce your commission by 1% if my team represents both sides of a transaction. But I'm going to give somebody on my team the buyer. And my team, I have 2 other girls on my team. They're sharp. I've taught them everything they know. And to be fair, like, I don't even like doing that because they're really sharp and they're hard negotiators. But at least I have somebody else representing the other side. So there's a little bit of distance and a little less conflict of interest. That's how I do it on my team. Like I said, not all agents out there do it that way. But I'm just telling you that because that's how much I hate it. Like, I don't know. I feel very loyal to the people that have hired me, and typically that's the seller. I wouldn't feel good about them thinking that, I kind of turn my back on them or am not on their side during a transaction. And I think that's the biggest downside. I did have one of my followers reach out to me and ask this question. Hey, Audra, we're in a dual agency situation right now. How do I know I'm getting the best price? And the answer is you don't. But here's a good rule of thumb. If you have a bunch of offers that are coming in, the one that's the best deal is the best deal, right? So I always recommend that anybody that's watching my channel to get net sheets on each one of the offers that come in. Now, if your house is on the market for a long period of time, you get one offer that comes in, it's a dual agency offer, and it's relatively within your expectation of price, I think you're fine. And I think that's really important if you are selling your house. Like, you should know-ish what your house is worth. So get an appraisal or go look on some of these sites, go look at the comps in your neighborhood. But if you are in a dual agency situation and you're asking the question, is this the right price? You should already know that, right? Have a general idea what the heck your house is. And if you don't know, that's a problem. So figure that out before you even put your house on the market would be my recommendation. I am a big proponent of buyers having their own representation. I would just highly suggest that if you're a buyer that you interview multiple different agents. I have done a video, which I will link down below, pretty much giving you the kind of questions you should be asking your buyer's agent. Now, for those of you that are like, Audra, we don't even know what agents to interview, I have partnered with a company that helps coordinate agents in your area. So be happy to put you in contact with some really good agents that are vetted in your area. There's a link down below. You just fill out the information and we'll make the connection for you. But please, please, please interview at least 3 agents if you are a buyer looking for representation in your area. So am I a fan of dual agency? I think you guys realize my answer is no, I'm not in love with it. Now, not to say that things can't go well, but just not a big fan of it, right? That conflict of interest thing just doesn't make me feel great, right? But if you are a buyer and you're up against some of these multiple counter offers, oftentimes you will get your offer looked at. So I just would say, make sure you're diligent as a buyer. Make sure you know what to bring to the table as far as your pre-qual letter, your proof of funds, all that stuff. Make sure you know that that listing agent doesn't have time to school you and walk you through every little detail. And if you're a seller, just realize that it might feel like you have an agent that's not on your side, but they do have to extend, fiduciary responsibilities on both sides. If you have really good people involved in the process, it works out great. If you don't have such good people in the process, it could be not so great. So just be aware of that. Thanks for watching another video. My name is Audra Lambert. I reside in Orange County, California. If you would like to buy or sell a house in my area, you know who to reach. Anyway, I hope you got some value. Thanks for watching the video. Please smash that like button and subscribe. I really appreciate it. I'll see you in the next video.